Everybody, we're starting our CDSS web chat number 2. And we're very excited to learn that there are over 60 people out there who are interested in our topic of creating a thriving open band. We have people listening in from as far away as Florida and Alaska, and everywhere in between. So we're going to start by having a few words from our executive director, Katy German.
Hi, everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us tonight, and it's especially fun. It's 8:30 here on the East Coast, so having a little bit of evening time as a staff together is also a treat for us. I just want to take one moment to let you all know why we're doing this and what inspired these web chats. We've been thinking a lot this year about what is CDSS uniquely positioned to do as a national and continental organization. How can we best ensure that these traditions survive? And the answer is to support the people who are making it happen. These are living traditions because of organizers, leaders, callers, and musicians that are not sitting necessarily in East Hampton, Massachusetts. And the best way that we can promote these activities and ensure that they last is to provide resources and opportunities to connect with each other, because there is a wealth of knowledge and creativity and experience in our network. And we want to help people tap into that. We don't want geography to be a barrier, and we want to come up with some creative ways to get people together. So web chats are one way we're going to do this. And I would be remiss in my duties if I failed to remind everybody that CDSS is a member and donor supported organization. So we hope first and foremost that these opportunities are useful and that they are inspiring and forge new relationships with other people across the country that can help you. But we also hope that you pay attention to what we're doing and that you're involved with us and engaging with CDSS. And yeah, we are where we are today because of you. We are your biggest fans. So thank you so much. And I am going to let Linda take the show.
So I am Linda Henry, forgot to introduce myself, member of the CDSS staff. And we'll be starting to hear from our speakers soon, but I'd like to introduce you to what's showing on your screen right now. For those of you who have computers, we'll be hearing from 4 different guests from Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Massachusetts. They'll each have 5 to 7 minutes to share specific things that they've been doing to help their open bands thrive. And while you're listening to them, if you have questions, you can type a short question with your name into the chat bar. And then around 9 o'clock our time, we'll have about 20 minutes of question and answer. And our staff member, Lynn Nichols, will be monitoring the Q&A. So she'll read one question at a time. We'll have a brief pause after each question to give our guests time to gather their thoughts, and they'll be chiming in with their input. And then we'll wrap it up at the end with telling you about more resources available through CDSS for organizers. So, Carol, are you ready? Here's Carol Ormand from Madison, Wisconsin.
Thanks, Linda. So let me tell you a little bit about the Madison Open Band. The Madison Open Band has been playing for the Tuesday night dances in Madison, Wisconsin for, we think, about 25 years. I moved here about 13 years ago, and it had been going for quite a while at that time. We play for the dance every Tuesday night with very rare exceptions when we can't have the hall. And it's open band every Tuesday. We typically have somewhere between 6 and 10 musicians in the band, but it could be fewer or it could be more. This picture that you can see of our dance hall shows the band is up in that balcony at what you might call the bottom end of the hall. We're on the far end of the hall from the caller. So there are several factors that I think make the Madison Open Band particularly successful and thriving, and I'll tell you about just a few of them. I'll try to be quick. My run through was too long. So one of the first things I think that actually makes quite a difference for us is that we do play every week. So we get lots of practice playing for dances, and those who are new to playing for dances make pretty rapid improvement. It's really easy to remember when we're playing, and it's really easy to figure out how to come join the band. You just really come up and talk to us any week. So the fact that we play every week means that there's a lot of experience within the band, but we also make newcomers welcome. So I think this is a really important balance that we try to strike. There's a really strong core of regulars. Those 6 to 10 people who come most weeks are there pretty much every week. And that means that there's a lot of experience within the band, so there's a redundancy of skill sets. So if I'm not there, someone else picks the tunes. If Bill's not there, someone else sets the tempo, someone else calls the changes, someone else signals the end of the dance. If neither one of us is there, somebody else can do all of those things, which is really an advantage, I think. At the same time, it means that we have lots of people who have musical ideas to share with the rest of the band, and we welcome that, and it's a very egalitarian sharing of the responsibility and leadership of the band. So there's that really strong core of regulars, and then as a counterplay to that, we do think very consciously about how to accommodate new people in the band. We have a relatively short tune list, and we also have an abbreviated list of tunes that we recommend that new band members learn first. These are tunes that we play really often, and we make sure that if they come back, we play some of the tunes that they've been working on from that short list. If they play by ear, we sit them next to somebody who is going to be a strong musician playing a similar part, whether they're melody or rhythm player. If they read music, we put some music in front of them. I don't read music when I'm playing for dances, but I do bring my notebook every week, and if somebody needs to borrow it, it's there. At the end of the evening, we always thank them for coming and tell them that we hope they'll come back, remind them that it's a weekly event so they can come anytime, and really try to make it possible for them to feel like they could come back the next time and be just as welcome. There are a few things about the logistics and the hall setup that I think are helpful to us. The band is playing without a sound system. There's a microphone for the caller, so they don't have to bellow, but the band is completely unmiked, which means there's no extra time for setup and takedown. It's really easy to come late or leave early if one needs to. It's very egalitarian, so there's no hierarchy of who gets to play on mic and who doesn't. It also means that if you're a fairly shy musician and you don't want to be on mic, you can play as quietly as you want in the background and still contribute to the music, but you don't feel like you're being put on the spot. We have a couple of callers in the band, which makes it pretty easy for us to figure out what tunes we want to play to go with any particular dance. And then the last two things I'll say are that I think the amount of fun we have is a big factor in our success. So I would say it's fun both for the band and for the dancers. We really do try to make sure that the music solidly supports the dance, and at the same time give people room to experiment with their music, try new things. Do things that we've never done before. As long as the musicians are listening to each other, I think it works really well. And finally, the dance community is incredibly supportive. So we have this dance every week. It's always open mic, it's always open band, and dancers have been coming to it for 25 years. And obviously we couldn't do it without them. So am particularly grateful to the Madison dance community for supporting this dance series so strongly.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Sure.
And if anybody is having questions at this point, feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat bar. So next up is Bob Kirkman, calling in from Atlanta, Georgia. Take it away, Bob.
Hey, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I agree with Carol that one of the keys to an open band is being able to play together often. We have a slightly different situation here in Atlanta, which is that we don't have a weekly dance that's for which an open band can play. We do have the regular Friday night dance, which always hires bands and tries to change up the bands every week. There is a smaller dance series so it's a midweek dance that's every other week, and we play that once a month. We play for the big Friday night dance once a quarter, and then we find other opportunities to play as we can. How we make up for the lack of a regular weekly dance to play for is we get together twice a month to practice, and we meet in at the home of a caller who opens her home to us every 2 weeks to play. And I think that's what's important about that is, again, echoing what Carol said, it's building trust among musicians. And part of it is sort of developing a core. So for example, so let me tell you a brief history of the band to give you a sense of how this developed. I started this band 8 years ago, almost exactly. It was the end of August 2010. And I put out a call for musicians saying, if you want to play for a contra dance, show up at my house. And 24 people showed up. So clearly there was an unmet need for an open band or for opportunities to play. From that original 24, I think there are probably 8 or 9 players who still show up regularly for practice and for gigs. And then there are other players who will sort of shift in and out over time. And so we developed a core, and the core of musicians really trust one another. We play together a lot, so we sort of know what we're all capable of, and so we rely on each other. The second thing that was kind of important is that, and this is something that I can't claim credit for, but which I certainly recognize and encourage, which was that a sense of community really began to develop among the musicians, and it's really just a matter of letting it happen. So, for example, we have a semi-annual backyard barbecue party that's hosted by one of our most committed and loyal fiddlers, and he also did the album cover you see on the slide there. This is something that he does for all of our big gigs. He takes photos of the gig and turns it into an album, or a fake album cover for us. We also have a band T-shirt that was designed by another one of our fiddlers. So we have a sense of identity and solidarity among the band. Third thing is that it's sort of a change in the band. When I first started the band, I was relatively new to playing for dances, and I was really excited by all the really cool tunes that were out there, and all the sort of high-end stuff, all the other Dave Barkley tunes and the Larry Younger tunes and all of that. And so I would, in addition to sort of common repertoire tunes, I would try to get the band to play some of these higher-end tunes. And I think I'm shifting now toward a much more emphasis on accessible tunes, ones that are suggested and selected by band members. So it's always been somewhat democratic where we select tunes. And what this does, I think, moving toward a more common repertoire of tunes that are familiar to many people and relatively easy to pick up, is it really lowers the bar for participation, so new people can sit in with us. It's also, I've been working really hard to get more of the regular musicians off book. Many of them are still sort of reliant on paper, and I'm trying to make them less dependent on the sheet music. But we also make the sheet music available, and I can talk later if people want to know about how we make our music available through an online repository. When we do practice, I've increasingly been devoting time to working on basic musicianship, ensemble playing, arrangement ideas, listening to one another, teaching one another tunes, otherwise just playing a lot of tunes together. So one thing is it's a chance for me to pass along things I learn in workshops. Other people pass on things they've learned in workshops they've done, band workshops or musician workshops. And there's also I have a device I take to practice that has come to be called the metronome of doom. And it is a metronome that is patched through a small amplifier. And we basically play games with the metronome where we'll set it at half speed and see if we can keep the band together on tempo. Just trying to get people to get a sense of a really strong internal sense of rhythm to support the dance. So those are some of the things we've done that I think have really helped keep our band lively.
Okay, great, Bob. Next up, we have Mike Reddig, who's joining in from Flagstaff, Arizona. Mike, do you have to unmute him?
You should have the ability to unmute him.
He may not know how.
Oh.
Mike, can you hear us? If you can hear us, you can unmute yourself, or I'll try to start. I'll try to find you and unmute you. Hang on.
Bear with us, folks.
Okay.
It may be at the bottom of your screen, Mike, a little microphone to click.
Okay, I can't share
There,
well.
there we go. Hi, Mike.
We're just starting to
Okay.
hear you now. Great.
Great. I'm glad to be unmuted.
Take it away.
Well, you know, we have some challenges out here in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's a long way to get to the next town. And sometimes if you really want to dance, you know, driving 6 hours to Tucson or to Albuquerque is your only option. There's a thriving traditional music group in Flagstaff and has been for 35 years or so. But this contra dance was just kind of a separate thing. And 30 years ago, what would happen is bluegrass musicians would show up when the dance started or sometime after the dance started and just kind of collect on stage. There was no sound system. Rhythm would be a moving target. And then the bluegrass musicians would get in the corner and start jamming when the caller was trying to teach a dance. And so to address this challenge, one of our members, Eric, said, we're going to have some requirements. And these requirements were, you have to show up on time if you want to play, and you have to go to at least one practice. And what happened is we promptly lost all of our good musicians. And we started practicing every Thursday night, and it really developed into a wonderful group. From the beginning, we were welcoming. It didn't matter what instrument people played. It didn't matter whether they had ever played for a dance before. We just said, come on, you are welcome to join us on stage. So for the last 25 years, we practiced every Thursday night. There is only a dance in Flagstaff once a month. And this band called Just Desserts, we started off practicing at Karen Mock's house, and John, her husband, would make desserts every night. And so that's how we got our name, which was another wonderful way to build community. But the important thing is that we just made everybody feel welcome. It was challenging, especially at the beginning. Some people wanted to get the music and start flipping through tunes, and other people just wanted to do the same tunes over and over again. Flagstaff does not have a tradition of dance, and so very often the dancers have never danced anywhere else. The musicians have never played for a dance before, and so welcoming everybody was a great way to get things going. And over the years, we've really developed some amazing musicians. One of the things we did early on was we looked at the schedules of musicians who might be passing through. We found out that, or callers, Ralph Sweet made flutes, and so he came to Arizona once a year to sell his flutes, and we got him to do not just a dance, but also a workshop for our musicians. Over the years, some of the weekend dance groups, we've gotten the musicians to come early or stay late and do workshops with our group. And it's been wonderful. They've been more than willing to work with our people, teach them their tunes, expand the repertoire, and get them connecting with the music, because when people walk into our open band, they don't necessarily get that it's all about the dance, that we have to connect with what's going on the floor. And so to get somebody like Larry Unger come in and say, okay, this next tune, everybody stand up and, look at somebody, okay, now switch, and to have people walking around during a workshop playing music and actually looking at each other. Some of the other people, Carol and Bob, have shared about short lists or common repertoire. That's one of the things that makes the music accessible to our people, is we have this short list we call the back pocket tunes, so that people have this common repertoire that we can rely on. And also we work hard trying to
I'm going to leave the meeting and come back.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to interject to confirm that the audio is still good. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
We're just having issues with the visual, but please proceed, and thank you so much.
I don't want to go too far into Linda's space. We do workshops. We figure out who's going to be near, and whether it's Andrew and Noah Van Nordstrom, we try to figure out, gosh, who are the Birdwashers? The Joseph Pimentels, the Noah Van Nordstroms. Who are the tourers? Who's the Larry Unger? Is Karina Wilson coming through? Is Audra Knuth coming through? And get them to work with our people, because a lot of our people have never danced anywhere. Some of our musicians don't even dance, and so we try to get them to connect. It's really a tight community. We've been fortunate over the last few years. We kind of have a David Kaner week where, we do. He helps us with a workshop, and then he comes to a regular practice, and then we do a potluck, and then he's calling and playing at the dance. And it gives people an exposure of, gosh, here's a wider world. The other thing I just want to briefly touch on is this whole idea of copyright. Some of our people show up and they've Xeroxed 20 copies of a tune they think is great, and they want to share it with everybody. And it's an education process saying, wait a second, some of these musicians have trouble paying their dentist bills. We can't just take their music. We have a library. We only make about $50 a month playing the various dances, but we try to buy a dozen of each of the Portland books. If you talk to a Bill Matheson or you talk to a Sue Songer, they will give you group discounts. And so we try to buy their books, even though it would be easy to Xerox them. People who come and do workshops are very generous with their music. Larry Unger will give us copies. Susan Conger will give us copies. So that's another thing we try to keep in mind. But I think the main reason for our success is because people are welcome. And if they're playing a tuba or if they're playing a bowron, they're still welcome. So I kind of jumped around, but I want to give Linda some time. Thank you.
No, that's great, Mike. Thank you so much. We're welcoming more questions. If you want to be typing them in on your chat bar, please also include your name. So chiming in as Linda Henry, not only a CDSS staff member, but also leader of an open band in Amherst, Massachusetts at the Fiddlers Green Contra Dances. There's a picture there on the screen. That was celebrating our 10th anniversary. Dance started about 14 years ago. And the way we got this open band started was that in the beginning, I was hiring bands, and my daughter was learning to play the fiddle and playing contra dance tunes, and she started nudging me saying, "Mom, I want to sit in with a band." And we started learning that not all bands enjoy playing with sit-in musicians. So we shifted the focus so that now we have, back then we started with having 2 anchor musicians, a good solid fiddler, and myself on piano, sometimes other people. And the rest of the stage was filled with sit-in musicians. We have usually about a dozen. And the fiddler is the only musician that's mic'd. It's a fairly small hall, and the piano is very audible, but the sit-ins are not mic'd. So there are several things we've been doing that I think are helping us have a healthy sit-in scene. One is that we do have a monthly music session. The dances happen on 4th Saturdays, and our sessions are on Thursdays, the week before. And at the sessions, we learn new tunes and play around with varying the sound of all of the instruments, as well as putting together 2 medleys that we then play at the upcoming dance. And we specifically choose accessible tunes so that all the musicians in our open band can join in. So then at the dance, similarly to what's going on the dance floor, where there's simpler dances during the first half and more challenging dances as the evening goes on. So up on the stage during the first half, we are playing mostly accessible tunes. And then in the second half, we ramp it up and include more challenging tunes so that way the musicians can self-select about when they dance and when they play. And then at the end, getting towards the end of the first half, we round everybody up for the last 2 dances of the first half, and that's when we play the 2 medleys that we prepared during the session the week before. And that's been going very well. We end the second half with the big band sound. And our next dance is this coming Saturday. And if any of you happen to be in the Amherst area, either this weekend or any 4th Saturday, you're welcome to join us on stage. Just bring your instruments and join in with us. We'd be glad to have you. So that's it for hearing from the 4 open band leaders. Keep on contributing your questions. We are looking at them as they come in, and would be happy to let our 4 guests take a turn answering your questions. So Lynn Nichols, CDSS staff member, is here to monitor the Q&A, and she'll be reading 1 question at a time, and we'll have a brief pause while the guests are gathering their thoughts, and then they'll be chiming in. So
thanks, Linda. The first question is from Debbie Robinson. She said, are these open bands paid or just a core set of lead musicians? And anybody can...
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Okay.
So this is Carol and Madison. Nobody in the mob is paid. We actually all show up and play just for the fun and adoration of the dancers.
Okay.
Anybody else?
We've negotiated a payment for the band because we think that that's important, that they understand that the band is a stakeholder and that the more stakeholders we have, the more people show up for the dance. But we use the money, we save it up to buy music, and we save it up to pay our traveling musicians for workshops, a couple of them a year.
Okay.
Okay, the next question is from Lisa Greenleaf. She says, do any of you have a restriction on percussion or amplifiers as an electric bass? If not, how do you manage these sometimes too loud instruments?
I can take that one. This is Bob. It's hard to exclude people who want to play percussion or bass, but I think we're fortunate in that the one regular bass player we have is also sometimes runs sound for the big Friday night dance in Atlanta. And so he has a good sense of what's too loud. And I think at practice, we simply talk about what's appropriate for playing bass or playing percussion for contradance. We're also fortunate that one of the main percussionists we have is really sort of started to learn to play percussion in a workshop at Cumberland Dance Week back in Kentucky. The workshop was called How to Play Percussion Without Driving the Fiddler Crazy. And that was actually really, really useful. So so we talk about how to have, a subtle enough touch and how not to overwhelm the music, how to actually fit the percussion in with the rhythm of the tune itself. And so we actually make that an explicit conversation during practice. I think that's the main way we handle it.
Thanks very much. Our next question is from Rick Boyce. And he says, are any of you able to piggyback on other traditional music organizations in your area? For example, in Cincinnati, we've been able to recruit musicians from an Irish music school.
There is a little bit of overlap in Flagstaff with the Irish musicians who have a regular session. And we get members coming into our band from the community orchestra. And so it's a wonderful challenge to incorporate those two extremes, ear musicians and people who are bound to the book, but they're wonderful resources.
Terrific. Do any of the other presenters want to chime in?
Yeah, this is Bob again. We have a relatively new folk school that opened in Atlanta recently, and we're making efforts to recruit some people from there. The issue being that a lot of the classes at the folk school also are on either Tuesday or Wednesday nights, which we either have our dance or the midweek dance, or we have a practice session. But we're trying to entice people from that. One of the other strange overlaps is there's a community marching band in Atlanta called the Seed and Feed Marching Abominable. And we have a number of musicians who are in both. We have a clarinetist. Even one of our fiddlers has gone off and joined the Seed and Feed, which is kind of odd, but not usually a marching band instrument. So yeah, there are some overlaps like that.
Cool. Anyone else want to chime in on that one? Presenters?
That's good.
Okay, next question is from Jean Monroe. What workable ways have people found to welcome newer pianists to open bands?
We have a situation right now where we have 2 and 3 piano players, and one of our piano players is very happy to sit back and use the thousands of voices that he has on his piano and play a piccolo on one tune and play a banjo on the next. We do rotate dances between piano players. But we also try to make them feel welcome to bring 2 and 3 pianos to practice. It's just at the dances we have to make it clear who's the piano for the given medleys.
Great. Anybody else?
We haven't had that issue with our open band, except the one time we did a joint appearance with the Asheville Open Band. They actually came down to Atlanta. We did a couple of gigs together, which was great fun. But then we had a bit of tension between the 2 piano players, one from each band. And it took some delicate negotiation to work out who would play keyboard when. So it is an issue because it's hard to play with more than 1 piano player.
Great.
Okay, great, thank you. Fred Karsh has a question. Everybody's welcome seems to be a theme. How do you accommodate multiple dominant instruments such as piano or drums?
We have a challenge in Flagstaff of trying to mic everybody, which is a nightmare for the sound guy, and I was the sound guy for most of the history of the band. But the nice thing is that then you have control over the complete sound. If you have a bass player, you make them play through the system, period, and unless they just have something that's barely loud enough for them to hear on stage. If you have somebody with a full trap set on percussion, we haven't, and fortunately haven't had to deal with that. But with the various different percussion players, we try to balance it through the sound system, even if it means turning some of them off. And then in our monitors, we just try to have a couple of key instruments, like maybe 3 instruments in the monitors, so that the musicians on stage don't get lost. But it is a challenge. How do you make sure these people feel welcome, feel like they're stakeholders, feel like they're involved, and yet not destroy the basic music for the dancers, which is the whole reason we're there.
Okay, anybody else want to chime in on that?
Well, I can tell a tale. I've heard there were previous open bands in Atlanta. Mine is not the first here. And I heard the tale that one of the previous open bands underwent accordion death when 3 accordion players started showing up to practice and all the fiddlers quit. So it's a little hard to control for that sometimes. And so really it's sort of, but I think that with percussion and bass and piano in particular, it's partly just negotiating, because you can't have more than one piano player or really more than one bass player at a time. And so we've had people swap off between tunes. And with percussion, again, I think it's a matter of in practice and at gigs as much as possible, just communicate what actually supports the dance and what gets in the way of the dance. And sort of encouraging people to be more nuanced in their approach to percussion. And they sometimes want to be, is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. I think I would enlist them in solving the problem, to give them a bit of ownership of the solution. Certainly taking turns is an option. If they're on if they're mic'd, then using the sound system to solve it is an option. But my inclination would be to go to all of them and say, look, there are 3 piano players. If all 3 of you play loudly all the time, it'll drown out everybody else. How are we going to solve that problem?
Mm-hmm. I actually have a question here from Leanne, who it actually follows up on this kind of nicely. At our local English country dances, some of our longtime non-professional musicians who have played for the dance for years have expressed that they, quote unquote, like things the way they were, which had usually been 2 to 4 musicians. What are ideas for expanding opportunities for others to play, but also keeping those who've been around for a long time feeling valued? Somewhat of the same thing that you just were talking about, but.
There are so many benefits about keeping the door open to as many people as possible. And sometimes I'm thinking of a caller who used to do workshops, and she would title her workshops, "How to Make the Dancers Around You Better." And so what she was really doing was telling people how to be basic good dancers under the illusion that really they were teaching the people around them. And I think the same thing can be done by talking to our musicians and asking them to make other people feel welcome and other people feel valued because they're that good. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I think my answer to this question is in part the fact that the Atlanta Open Band does not have a monopoly on playing for dances in the area, and that not only do we have all the dances in Atlanta, we have dances over in Athens and up in Chattanooga, and so within 2-hour drive we have a number of dances. So we've had a number of spin-off bands come out of the Open Band. We have one that's all wind players and a bass player and maybe a bass and guitar. And so we have a flute, recorder, and clarinet made a band, and so they go off and play gigs elsewhere, and they play other gigs. And so we've had spin-off bands like that might help. It depends on how many local dances there are, and whether the Open Band has a monopoly on those dances.
Cool. We're going into a new topic here. Kelsey says, any advice for pitching the idea of starting an open band to the dance board or general band booker?
It's been a while for most of us, I guess.
Yeah, I think that because I started the Atlanta Open Band 8 years ago, like I said, and I didn't wait for permission. And I think the thing is that fortunately we had the midweek dance, the Tuesday dance that's here in Decatur, which is just east of Atlanta, is really an open band, and is part of the purpose of the dance was to let new bands try stuff out and new callers try stuff out. It hasn't quite lived up to that purpose in a while, but the open band has been playing it for a long time now. I went ahead and started the band, and then once the band was started, we had some momentum and had the core community. We started playing the Tuesday night dance pretty regularly, once a month. And then it was a matter of negotiating with the organizers of the big dance to let us play. Our big break came when there was like a dance just before Christmas one year for which they could not find a regular band. And so in desperation, they turned to us, and that was our first chance to be on the big stage. And so that was our big break.
Great. I think another idea is just to help the board understand the value of bringing along more musicians for the community, and open bands are a great way to do that.
We've had amazing musicians come through the open band that never would have gotten involved with playing for contra dances if the open band hadn't been there.
Yeah.
Over the years, we've had to negotiate. There have been times when there were so many other bands that wanted to play for the dance that they wanted to cut the open band back to, twice a year or 3 times a year. Right now, it's a good thing that the band has thrived and stayed playing. Right now, they play every other month 2 of the local dances. And then with other gigs, we play about 1.5 gigs a month. But it's an important, it's a thriving pool of musicians that if we didn't have that, we would have run into some very rough years. I think it would be important to negotiate and say, hey, give us once a quarter, give us, every other month, give us, once every 4 months, or give us the Christmas dance, and so that you have something to build around.
Yeah, another angle on it is that it can financially be a good idea. You could help the board see that an open band would give an evening of not having to pay the big bucks for a well-known band. So we've got a question here from Mike.
Yeah, this is from Amanda, and this is from Mike especially perhaps. I just moved to a remote area that doesn't have contra within about 4 hours. I've met a couple of other musicians interested in playing, but we're all fiddlers. Any suggestions on getting the word out in a small area that has no experience with contra dance or contra music?
Well, there are guitar players nearby, I'll guarantee you. Now, they may never have played fiddle music before. I think what I would do is try and find a caller who, because it's all very well and good if you want to play music, but if you can't get a caller to get people moving in some kind of reasonable direction and get them enthused, then you're not going to have anybody coming to listen to you play. So, maybe there's a statewide organization that has callers that you can get them to come to your community and call a dance.
I'll pipe in here too. I would tell everybody I know that I'm looking for other musicians to play for dances, and do they know anybody who plays anything?
Great.
And I would try and get my friends to do the same thing. Just network like crazy.
Sounds great. Thanks, Carol. This is from Renee. how do the open bands work with callers? For example, are there certain dances or tunes callers can't teach because of difficult tunes, or can they send certain band members the music ahead of time? What sort of limitations are there for callers and musicians, and how do you work around them, if at all?
So I might have the biggest challenge here of all of us. Our band is in a balcony on the opposite end of the hall from the caller. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. It helps that there are two callers in the band. So what typically happens is there are some hand signals that we use back and forth. If a caller wants a specific tune, they can name it into the microphone and ask us if we play it, but we've trained them that it's really better to ask that ahead of time, before they step up to the mic to call a dance. And if we don't play it, we'll just let them know, and if they would like us to learn it, we'll tell them that we'll take a look at it and see what we can do. There are, I'm trying to think about, there are other kinds of communication between band and caller that are fairly standard. The callers don't describe the dance to us or tell us what kind of tunes they want. We just watch the walkthrough and pick something.
We're not really in a situation where we try to rotate directors of the band, and it'd be fair to say that some of the directors aren't really in a position to watch a walkthrough and immediately figure out what a good medley is. Sometimes we're fairly limited. We try to work on making sure that we have a variety of medleys and asking the callers to describe the kind of tunes they want instead of throwing out specific tunes. And to some extent, we have a lot of rhythm in our band, and sometimes it's like a freight train. So if we have a caller who expects to call 10 or 12 flowy jigs, we've got a problem. But we try to educate our musicians that the caller is boss, that it's all about the dance, and it's our job to try and work with them.
Okay, great, thanks.
I see that Renee posted a follow-up about how she was thinking of English country dance where there's a specific tune for a dance. I think in contra dance where it comes up is sometimes if the caller wants to do a singing square or has any other special requests, and basically we just try to work with them enough ahead of time, if we know we're working together, that we can get that music to the musicians.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and it comes from Tanya Rottenberg, and it's if you have a rehearsal, Rottenberg, sorry. She asked this specifically of Mike, but the others are certainly can chime in. If you do have a rehearsal, that is on a different night than your dance, do people ever come only to the rehearsals and not to the dance?
We rehearse every Thursday night. Of course, everybody doesn't come to every practice, but there are some musicians who just don't feel comfortable on stage. And some of those people over time do show up and play for the dances. But they're welcome to come to just the practice. They're welcome to come and knit at the practice. They're welcome to come and read books at the practice. It's a community.
Terrific.
At our dance, we don't have a requirement one way or the other. We just say it's fine to come to the rehearsal even if you can't make it to the dance, and vice versa. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I think this is where having the sort of core of regulars is really kind of important. Is that there are some people who reliably show up for practices and show up for dances, and who are sort of who become the functionally the core of the band. And then there are some people who show up to practice but not dances, and vice versa, and that's fine.
We have a few extra minutes right here. Do either any of the guests want to say one very quick challenge you've encountered and very briefly the solution you came up with?
You know, occasionally over the years we've had, and I call them flippers, people who come from the written tradition of music, maybe a community band, and they just want to sit there and flip through the books and play tune after tune after tune. That's great, but you know, it does alienate some people, and also it doesn't really prepare the band for playing for a dance. So it's figuring out gentle ways to say, okay, well, let's set aside 20 minutes here, and you know, everybody put the music down and let's play something we all know. It's important to have a touchstone like that.
That sounds great. Okay, I think we will wrap it up now. We wanted to let you know about some resources that are available to through CDSS,
and I'll just chime in that we just lost our video, so bear with us, but Linda will tell you about them.
For those of you who are looking at computers, if you go to the CDSS website, that's www.cdss.org, and look under the resources section, there is a section for resources for dance organizers. And in that, we have a very newly launched section called the Organizers Resource Portal. And this has been put together by Emily Addison, who is actually listening in this evening from Ottawa, Ontario, wearing her hat as an open band leader. So that portal contains just a vast amount of information for dance organizers on many topics. So feel free to check that out. Emily has also recently launched a quarterly e-blast called Shop Talk that's specifically to bring resources to organizers. And we also have a quarterly e-blast for CDSS affiliates. And we offer community outreach grants. I'm actually the person who manages the grants program. So if you have any questions, you can be in touch with me. There are links here to the bulleted list.
And we will be putting these slides up on the website in our organizer portal section. So
our next grant deadline is coming up on October 1st. So you can check out the grant application. For example, if your group wants to have a music workshop and hire some musicians that are passing through to play for your dances, that would be a perfect opportunity for a grant application. Also in the CDSS news, we feature articles for dance organizers, and we have this new web chat series. And last but not least, I am cooking up an idea that I would like to have your input about. I'm picturing a section on the CDSS website specifically as a resource for open bands. So I'm going to be interested to hear your feedback about this in our survey that we'll be sending out tomorrow. But what I'm imagining is it would have 3 sections. One would be a directory of open bands with a listing that would include where the open bands are and descriptions of them and contact information. Another would be a place that we could share repertoire. I'd love to see a section on accessible tunes, for example. And the third section could be about issues and challenges that open bands have encountered and solutions that anyone might have. So let's turn to the next slide. One more wrap up here. Tomorrow we'll be sending out a survey to all of you who have joined this call. Since we're just starting out this web chat series, your feedback is very valuable to us. And in the survey, I'll include a place for you to give your feedback about the web chat and and about this open band resource idea. And if you have any questions that were not answered during the call, there'll be a place in the survey for you to send us your questions. So jot them down now while they're fresh in your minds. We've been recording this web chat, and when we send out the survey tomorrow, we'll send you a link to where the web chat will be available on the CDSS the recording will be available on our website. So if you know of anybody who wanted to join the call and wasn't able to, feel free to share the link to the recording. So we've chosen a general time frame for the next web chat will be in mid-January, and we'll be sending out the details. But we do know now that the focus will be increasing youth involvement.
Linda, how did you choose this topic?
We chose this topic based on a survey that we sent to CDSS group affiliates, and we got their feedback about which topics they were having challenges with and which topics they were having success with. And out of all of the 15 or so topics, the youth involvement question seemed to be the most in demand. So I think we've come to the end of our second web chat. We thank you all very much for joining us, and we would love to hear from you at any time about your questions and comments or requests. And we very much appreciate all the hard work that each of you have been doing to keep music alive and well in your communities far and wide. So good night from CDSS to you all.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.